This is the Uncommon Success Podcast, where we explore topics about success and dive into the stories of leaders who found success along the way.
And success isn't easy. It takes some grit, a little bit of luck, and a whole lot of patience.
We know that success comes in many shapes and sizes, and we're exploring them all.
So get ready for a journey through the remarkable stories of individuals who have faced challenges head on and learned many lessons along the way.
From business moguls to artists, educators to industry leaders, entrepreneurs to athletes. If it's an uncommon success story, we'll cover it.
The Uncommon Success Podcast. Real stories, real people, real success.
This episode is brought to you by B Lane Printed Apparel. Are you looking for great custom apparel that will set your organization apart from everyone else? You need B Lane Printed Apparel, where passion meets quality. At B Lane, they go beyond just printing. They bring your brand to life. From eye-catching hats to shirts that redefine comfort, they've got it all covered. Quality materials, quality water-based inks, quality service. Because you deserve the best. Visit belane.com now and let your imagination run wild. That's BEALANE.com. Don't just wear apparel, wear quality. Your journey begins at belane.com.
Welcome to episode number 8 of the Uncommon Success Podcast.
Yes, welcome to our community. Glad that you're tuning in today. I'm your host, Andy Coats, and I am joined by my lovely wife today, Cristi Coats, who is filling in for Brinley.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I had Shayna on the podcast a few weeks back, and she did great. I had our niece, Mackenzie, on the podcast as a co-host. And early this morning, I got a text from Brinley saying she was sick and she wasn't going to be able to make it. And I started to check with Shayna again, and she's out of town. Mackenzie couldn't do it. And so early this morning, my wife is sitting there, and she's like, would you consider me? I was like, yep, you're up. And so when I got the confirmation officially this morning that no one else could do it, I said, you're on. And so she stepped in. So thank you, Cristi, for helping us out.
Yeah.
She's gone. Brinley, I think she's left us. I think she has just decided, I've had enough, I'm through, and she ain't coming back. I don't know.
She probably just liked that break. Everybody likes to have a little breather every now and then.
I think the problem was I joked too much saying we fired Brinley, and she thought she was really fired or something because she's done. Well, we definitely miss her. Definitely going to miss her as now 3 weeks in a row. And she's out next week too, so it'll be 4 weeks. We miss her. It's going to be...
Yes, she is. She's definitely very amazing, but you do kind of make it sound like you just scraped the bottom of the barrel to get me on the podcast. Like you settled with me.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you're going to do great today.
Okay. And
you're going to be wonderful. And before I get myself in any more trouble, why don't we just, I want to introduce our guest to us.
Yes, sounds good.
To keep me out of trouble. So we're excited today to have joining us as our special guest, Miss Donesa Walker is in the studio with us today. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, we're so glad to have you here.
Yeah, for sure. And, before we kind of just jump into all of our conversation for today, Cristi, why don't you take a few minutes, first things first here, and introduce Donesa to us, reading her bio.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Today, we are thrilled to spotlight Donesa Walker, a distinguished cognitive and reading specialist with an impressive educational journey. Holding a bachelor's degree in elementary education with minors in French and Spanish from Evangel University, Donesa continued her academic pursuit, earning a master's degree in educational administration and reading specialist from Texas A&M and UT Tyler. As a board-certified cognitive specialist, Donesa boasts over 2 decades of teaching experience, including leadership roles as a school administrator and university dean of online programs. Her passion for education led from serving as a district reading specialist and master's reading teacher to now owning and operating Learning RX franchises in Louisiana, where they have been recognized as the nation's top 5 franchisee for the past 15 years. Wow. She's a devoted wife and mother. Her 2 sons, both Learning RX graduates, inspire her dedication and cognitive training. Currently pursuing her doctorate in educational psychology, Donesa's expertise extends beyond academia as a homeschooling advocate, church leader, and prolific author of over 15 books across various genres. Her invaluable contributions to research projects and cognitive skills and learning in public systems exemplify her commitment to transforming education for generations to come.
That's pretty impressive.
It
You know,
is.
I feel like I'm almost in trouble here because most of the time, people who have those kind of resumes, I talk to them in principals' offices growing up, and so it just has me a little worried, you know. So
Sounds so good,
Yeah.
right?
we are excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yes. Well,
So-
before we jump into your story, Donesa, as we just heard, that you're basically a personal trainer for the brain, which I
Right.
think is so cool. I'm so excited to learn more about that. But to start us off, we'd like to first have a little discussion around the idea of continual learning.
Right.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated by the idea of lifelong learning. That people, as they age, they continue to grow, continue to learn, and it just fascinates me that when people say, "I want to continue to get better and not settle." So I'd like to have just a little bit of discussion here at the beginning of this to frame our discussion for today. And even before we dive into our topic and hearing your story, I read an article that set up this topic, which is why I even asked you to be part of this podcast, was based on this article that talked about lifelong learners. And it said this, that being a lifelong learner is important in order to have these four things: relevance, innovation, flexibility, and longevity. So those four important ingredients that if you're not a lifelong learner, it's hard for you to stay. So I'd like to just kind of have some discussion around these a little bit today before we jump into your story of those four areas. So relevance, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why, as a lifelong learner, it's important to focus on that continual learning in order to be relevant. What do you think?
You get lost. So the neuroplasticity of the brain means basically your brain is constantly developing. So if you want to stay relevant to your culture, you want to stay relevant with technology, you want to stay relevant with everything that's happening, you actually have to continue to learn the process. And if you don't continue to learn the process, then obviously your brain begins to age and drift down. And
Yeah.
so it's really important for your brain to stay sharp is to learn something new constantly. And that keeps you not only relevant to the culture that you're around and to relating to those. There's data that tells us, statistics that tell us that normal relevance is only 10 years on either side of your age group. If you
Okay.
want to expand that and to be more relevant to an older group, a younger group, you know, to be able to be relevant to a larger audience, then you have to be constantly learning. Otherwise, as you age, you become old hat.
Disconnecting, yeah.
We're going to squash that old saying of you can't teach an old dog new tricks and be relevant to today.
Right, absolutely,
that's good.
yeah. And old dogs do need to learn new
Yes.
tricks.
Right.
And that goes back to that next, you know, about staying in the lane, you know, keeping current with what's going on.
I love that.
That's good.
Yeah, and we all want to, I think, especially as leaders, you want to be relevant. You want to maintain that relevance in culture. So learning, very important. The next piece here it talks about is innovation. What are your thoughts on innovation? Like, why is lifelong learning important to the area of innovation? What are your thoughts?
Well, innovation is something that's constantly recreating or coming up with new ideas.
Yeah.
So the creativity part of our brain relies on us actually learning constantly so that we can be creative. So if you think about how the brain is wired, the more creative, the more out of the box thinking actually creates more innovation.
Right.
So a lot of people don't like to think about 2020 as being a gift, but that year actually
Right.
required a lot of innovation because we had to make changes and transitions to our lifestyle in so many ways. And those people who had that cognitive flexibility and pivoted, those people, not only did their brains and their businesses grow, but so many other things, their connections and their outreach, and so many things happened for them that was critical in their brain and in their life.
Yeah, innovations on how to better use technology came out of that.
For sure.
Yeah, so just the fact that, you know, when you're able to just stay in what's comfortable, then it's easy to get into that lane and just keep, you know, it'll eventually become a rut because you're down
Right.
that same path constantly.
For sure.
And if you're hiking a trail, the more you hike that trail, eventually that becomes a rut.
Right,
that you
absolutely.
stay in. And so that innovation doesn't happen because there's no need for it.
Well, and a lot of people think that, creating the rut in the brain, just by rote memorization is a good thing. And it is to an extent. But then again, like you said, that the brain gets stuck in knowing that information. And so then it just kind of squashes
Plateaus
it. Yeah,
or-
it plateaus and gets over it. So
Yeah.
it's really important that you do that. I tell my clients all the time, move your furniture in your house.
Yeah.
I mean, it just changes your brain the way. Go
Right.
sit in a different place at your church. I mean, do something different that makes your brain think in a different direction.
Yeah.
Because that part actually sparks creativity.
That's good.
That leads to kind of the next word they mention here, which is flexibility, or for that's a real fancy word, I guess, for really just change.
Right.
The ability to change. What are your thoughts there? Like,
Well,
why
and
is-
adaptability,
Yeah.
change and adaptability. So, in the World Economic Forum says that the cognitive flexibility actually is the number one skill needed as we progress into the next part in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So, the workers coming forward, the more cognitive flexibility you have, adaptability to change.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are going to move up.
Yeah.
In their life. So that is something that we have to change because a lot of us get stuck in what we've done it the same way, and we don't learn to transition
Right.
Yeah.
and do things different. And when we do, I mean, just think of it from, parents and perspectives. You have two different children. If you try to do the same thing with the second child that you did with the first child, whew, you are in trouble.
Not gonna
and
work.
so that's not going to fly, So, and it's the same way if you do the same thing as a boss, if you do the same thing with the two employees or coworkers, or in any walk of life that you do, if you approach everything the same, it's going to get stagnant. It's going to get boring.
Right.
One
Yeah.
thing, and you're not going to be as good at it because you're going to try to do it old hat.
It seems
Yeah.
like the more adaptable you are, the more you practice that, the better you are at it, the more inclined you are to be flexible. And then, like you said, that's a strength within
Right.
your mind.
A critical strength, and it
Right.
actually grows the brain. It forces those neurons to fire in a different direction, which
Yeah.
actually grows the brain and keeps the brain vibrant.
Yeah.
It's real difficult for a lot of people because most people don't like change because they get real comfortable in predicting what is going to happen. And if you change something, it's harder to predict. We never know what the future holds, but we can have somewhat of predictions based on past behavior and past patterns. And so a lot of businesses, they get stuck, leaders get stuck in, well, this is what we do, this is our culture, and they know what they've learned, and they keep looking back on what they've already learned and focusing on that and hoping that that's going to be enough to get them through. I love what you said there, that like in the future, the next 20 years, it's going to be all about who can adapt, who can adjust.
Yeah.
Just the introduction of artificial intelligence. To those
Sure.
who, if maybe you're listening today and you struggled with the change and transition into either the internet, or I know some who struggle with the idea of email and stuff, that was a difficult transition, to then the transitioning of everything's done online. That was challenging. Social media, how that was challenging. If those were difficult, just wait, because what artificial intelligence is coming out with, the need for that flexibility, adaptability is going to be huge. So
Crazy
I love that.
huge. And so it's so interesting how it's adapting our whole world and changing our whole world.
Yeah.
And our kids are catching up to it. And a lot of older people especially start going, well, I'll let the kids do it. I'll let the young ones do it. But when you do that, you're missing out on an opportunity to grow your brain
Yes.
Yeah.
and to refine your skills and to become stronger. And that actually can prevent aging. It
Yeah.
can actually prevent things like dementia.
Right.
And,
Right.
so those are the things, the socializations and those reaching out and doing things a little bit different actually change your brain into a great way.
Which leads into that last thing they had there. They mentioned was longevity. That if I'm gonna make it in the coming years, because what we know that every generation needs are the people, the trailblazers, the pioneers that go before them. But it's important to have that mentoring that still works. It's great if you say, hey, AI is happening. I'm going to just leave that to the young kids and let them master it. But they still need somebody who's going to lead them. And if you just dismiss it and don't want to learn anything about it, then they're going to eventually pass you up.
Well, not
And,
only that,
you
but
know,
if you look at history, I mean, a lot of our elder people actually know history and they
Yes.
know what's
Yeah.
true and what's not true. And as we've seen with AI has eras.
Right.
And so, I mean, it requires our older generations to step up and dive in
Right.
Yeah.
so that they can actually correct the AI tendencies
Right.
Right.
to ignore things that are really important, And I think that keeps them young, that keeps their brain, flossed, for want of a
Right.
different word,
Right.
that keeps those synapses firing and keeps them new. And that's really important for us for adaptability. I mean, I can't. Just think if you go to a doctor or any type of professional and they don't know current law, they don't know current medicine, they
Right.
don't know current, trends or things like that, and you go and you talk to them about it and they're clueless, then you're like, oh, I need to go find somebody else, right?
Right.
And so that perpetuates those of us in business and in life to constantly be learning new things, whether you're a mom learning the new swaddle thing. I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
Right, right, yeah.
or whether you're somebody who's on the cutting edge writing books or learning new things in terms of like brain training. I mean, going back to 2020 and how we had to adapt, we had always delivered brain training 1-to-1. It was always
Right.
1-to-1. But 2020, we couldn't do that.
Right.
So we learned, we had to pivot into delivering it virtually,
Yeah.
which has been huge.
Right.
It's been a really great thing
Yep.
for our business and a great thing, for many clients who did have a learning RX in their area.
Yeah, love that. So as we even here in a moment, as we jump into your story and talk through some of this, this has been some fantastic discussion. And before we get to your questions, I'd like to just take a moment. You've mentioned a few times now, even in the bio about Learning RX. I want to take a moment and just let our audience know a little bit about your business, what you guys do, and how incredible it is. So I want to tell you about Learning RX. Now, if you have been listening to the podcast as an avid listener, you have heard us mention Learning RX before in an ad read, but I want to share it with you again. Learning RX. Maybe your child is struggling in the classroom or with homework. Learning, especially subjects like reading and math, doesn't start in the classroom. It starts in your child's brain. If your son or daughter is having trouble learning, then their cognitive skills may need strengthening, and Learning RX is there to help. Research shows that long-term learning issues can impact students for life. So the value of a strong learning skills is priceless. Your child's time is the one asset you cannot return. So investing in your child's future and making the best use of their time as a resource is urgent. So don't wait. Give Learning RX Shreveport a call today and set up an assessment. Their certified brain trainers can help your child by improving the lack of focus, slow processing speed, and long-term memory. So give them a call at 318-797-8523. Again, that's 318-797-8523. Or you can visit their website at www.learningrx.com/Shreveport. So whether you're a kid, an adult, whatever it might be, they're helping you out. So get started today with Learning RX Shreveport now.
Well, this is episode number 8, and the title of our episode is Keep Learning and Growing. And we have the brain guru with us in the studio today.
Yes, who better to discuss lifelong learning and growth with than a board-certified brain trainer, which is going to be so helpful for me today because my brain needs a whole lot of training. So
Don't we all?
I'm going to hope for just some nuggets here.
Yeah.
Christy's hoping
Oh, yeah.
that this solves my problems today. So
I'm hoping I could just get some just from being in close proximity to her. Like, I feel like my brain is getting stronger already.
Yeah. So we want to hear a little about your story and ask you a bunch of questions here. So, Christy, why don't you kick us off with the first question?
Sure. Well, we want to hear about your story. So can you walk us through what inspired you to become a cognitive training specialist and to start Learning RX?
Yes. So I have a family history of dyslexia. So dyslexia was something. So my brother was murdered when I was started in college.
wow.
My dad's a pastor, and he had stayed the night with a friend, and he was shot him to see what it felt like to kill somebody. Which was just, but my parents had a nervous breakdown. I mean, it just really, traumatized their world. And so I was helping my siblings study, and discovered that neither one of them could really read well.
Wow.
And I was like, what is this? I don't understand because I didn't struggle.
Right.
And so that was my first introduction to a learning difference that I didn't, have any awareness of. And so actually the gift of dyslexia is that you're brilliant people, and so I was able to discover how brilliant that they were, and it was just that they needed to learn differently.
Yeah.
And so I became a dyslexia specialist. That's why I went to school, to be a dyslexia specialist, and I taught my brother and sister to read. They lived with me for a little bit, and that was a real big change in my life, or a transition in my life. And so that's what I did for many, many years. That's why I became a reading specialist. That's why I became a dyslexia specialist, was doing that. And so in doing that all those years, I would see so many kids in all the programs that are available through our systems. We just didn't have enough time to make the big change that I wanted to see for these kids. And it was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I had a mom who introduced me to Learning RX and was telling me about it. And I was like, yeah, it's just tutoring. I wrote it off, honestly.
Yeah.
And at this point, I was teaching across the line in Texas. That's where I was born and raised, is in Texas. And long story short, married a Louisiana boy, was over here. And so I had started working as the dean of online studies, and just, life transitions, how they happen.
Oh, yeah.
And I was promoted to district reading coordinator, discovered Learning RX, came across it, thought it was very fascinating, wanted to put it in my district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Went and visited with them and realized what they did was so intensive, and I was pumped. I was like so ready to have it in my school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, I doubt your school district's going to pull, and go for this. It's because of the amount of time and the amount of individuals that, you need to take. And so I ended up leaving that system because I had enough years in. I could officially retire later on in life, but I left and opened the Learning RX Center in 2008.
Okay.
And that has been a whirlwind and a dynamic, fun time of the last 15 years. Over 1,500 graduates. And the stories, guys, the stories are just incredible. That's why I keep doing it.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just life-changing. It's so life-changing, and it's so incredible, whether that person is, 84 or they're 4.
Yeah.
It's really neat to watch people be able to get their skills back from people who've had traumatic brain injury, car accidents, hitting the head with a baseball, all kinds of things like that, to those who are struggling with a little bit of, aging brain, and then those that have dyslexia or ADHD or some type of other, learning challenge.
Yeah.
And what I love the most about it is making learning fun.
Yeah.
So that's my passion, that learning should be lifelong,
Right.
and learning should be fun. And those go hand in hand, because when you enjoy the learning process, then you want to continue that learning process.
Right.
And when you don't, that's when you begin to shut down and pull away. And so that's my passion, and that's what I have loved to see how people can just embrace, the newness of things, and get to new places
Yeah.
in their life, just by learning that they can learn. I mean, I hated math growing up. I hated math growing up. I was a reader and hated it, but I didn't know it was because of the way my brain had wired, and that I could actually get that skill. And it was incredible for me. I had 2 master's degrees. And for me to go and find out that I could actually become in love with math, and I no longer had to be directionally challenged, north, south, east, west. No more, you have to turn right by Burger King.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was really neat for me. That was just awe-inspiring, that your brain could actually be changed by doing exercise.
I love that. And I love that it's not just, when we think of learning a lot, that's like just for kids. We think of just, most of us, when we think of learning, we think that happens when you're a child. You're in school and you're having to learn, right? But I love that you guys are focusing, and you specifically are feel that passion, that calling to be able to make that difference. What are some misconceptions in the area of learning and how our brain works that you encounter quite a bit in your experience?
I think some of the worst things that I hear are, we have a tendency to write off people who are lacking in certain skills. We tend to think that if they're in special education or that they've, struggled with the learning process, that they're always going to struggle with that. They're set for life. They've been dealt these cognitive cards. They're never going to get past that. And I think that is probably the biggest frustration that I have with from school systems to parents to, people that just don't understand how neuroplasticity works and how the brain can change. And if you train it, if you do the right things, that you don't have to write yourself down. You don't have to, because it causes a lot of mind shame. It causes a lot of I'm not smart, I am stupid, a lot of those types of things. And I hate that, because that's not who God designed us to be. That's not who he wants us to be, And so I really like so that's probably my biggest frustration is that we tend to write people off for less than. I mean, dyslexia is a passion of mine because of what I've told you, but there's so many learning differences. There's so many learning challenges. Now, the term neurodiverse is, more embraced, and that's the neurodiversity is a gift. It's a blessing, because that's where we think with that cognitive flexibility, and we adapt and we learn how people learn and their perspectives. And wow, what a gift some people's brains are.
Yeah, it's just they're different. Like, it's not that they're right or wrong in how they're learning, just different.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
So when you get a student that comes to Learning RX, what would be your approach to helping them improve, the learning capabilities that they do have through this brain training?
Well, what we do first is we do a cognitive assessment. So we first establish, how does your brain learn? And I think that is a priceless gift that every human being should have.
Yes.
I mean, we get our vision checked, we get our teeth checked, we get our, everything else in our life checked, our blood pressure, our temperature. I mean, we go for all these checks, but we rarely check about this one thing that can be so life-changing for us if we just understood the why behind our learning differences or our learning challenges. I think everybody should have that. I think that is a baseline that's critical for everybody.
Right.
So we do that first. And then once we know what their learning processes are, then we can customize the program and individualize the program to where we can actually change those skills to be better, embrace those skills. So if they struggle with visualization like I did, then, I couldn't picture math in my head. So I avoided math because I couldn't picture it in my head, But once I could picture it in my head, man, it opened a whole world of things for me. And so I think that's the same thing as for our kids. I mean, I watched it with my sons. Genetically, they're my kids. Genetically, they struggle with the same mathematical principles that I did. But when they went through brain training, it changed their world. And so I think if every child and every person could understand how their brain learns, that part to me is priceless. Even if you don't do the brain retraining, just understanding how your brain learns is so powerful.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like personal training or physical therapy, for your muscles, and you learn, functional movements, and you learn what might be either maybe I don't know if I have any challenges, but I just want to improve, or maybe I do have physical challenges, and then I go and I get, physical improvement.
Right.
It seems very, very similar. And for your brain, and like you said, that's even more important than your physical body in so many ways.
Well, it just controls a lot of it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's such an interactive piece of how your brain and your body work together. And so understanding that, I mean, I get PT, physical therapy, because I've had all these surgeries in my life, so I get it. And I embrace it, and I go in and do those things. But this is the same thing for our brain as, you are surprised by how many things can impact our brain, from the smallest things of not drinking enough water.
Yes.
Yeah.
The very tiniest things can really change the way your brain learns and grows. And so embracing those and knowing those things, that is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
That's great.
Even just, I love that you guys start with an assessment. That's in all areas of life. That's a helpful starting place. Is let me assess where I'm at to know how I can start making those improvements. They have a brain quiz that you can do on their website, and so I took that brain quiz over the weekend just to see, and like I learned some areas where it's like, hey, this may be an area. It doesn't say, hey, this is an area you are failing in, but like here's an area where maybe you could use some improvement and some training in.
Right.
And here's some areas where you're strong in. So, and it reflected. It was a good picture
That's
of
neat.
what I knew about myself, where I'm strong in my brain and where I'm not.
Yeah.
And it picked it out. So,
Yeah.
and it was just a few questions. It wasn't even like it was a major. Assessing where you're at compared to other people.
Right.
And I loved it.
Just a little
quick
screening tool. It doesn't take long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just an introduction,
Yeah.
to do that. And then we actually have cognitive assessments that can be taken in the privacy of your home, online, 35 minutes. You have the results. You don't have to meet with anybody if you don't want to. You can just look at the results yourself. Or if you want to meet with someone and talk about those results and what you can do, then you can do that. I mean, it's the power of the knowing.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that is really cool. Just really cool.
So tell us maybe just a few success stories. You've been doing this for many years now, and you guys have made top 5. And even we
awesome.
read in the bio that over the past 15 years they've been top 5
Yes.
franchisee, but they've actually been number 1 twice in the nation. I think if I read that correctly.
Congratulations.
Probably a lot more than that, but
Right.
2 that I actually received the glass for.
Yeah.
Two that you got the recognition
Proudly.
for.
2 that I actually got the recognition for. Yeah. It's
so what's some of the just success stories that you've seen over the years?
so many that I can start with from the yes. I'll tell you one of my really, really favorite ones, which is not a young kid, but I'll tell you those 2. One of my favorites was there was an elderly lady who went to church with me for many years. And one day she calls my office and she goes, and she says her name and she says, I saw your commercial on TV and I don't know how I know you, but I know you. And I told her how we knew each other and I told her, what I did. And so anyways, they brought her. She had had a stroke and been told by her children had been told to go ahead and put her into a step down unit that she was developing dementia and she was like basically, an end of life phase type thing. And 9 weeks later, her whole life had changed and her kids were so grateful.
Wow.
And it was great to watch her be able to give memories to her kids that she had forgotten. It was so neat to watch those interactions. And it blessed me so much because that was something that was, such a challenge for her. I love, the stories of, we have we have a student of the year every year, but I can tell you one young lady, she basically had gotten her life written off, so to speak. She'd been kicked out of her house. She couldn't read. She couldn't be successful. And another family took her in, and they brought her to Learning RX. And the change in her was dynamic. And, today, for somebody who was kicked out of school, dropped out of school, whatever, and she's a teacher now, that is an incredible change over that period of time.
Yeah.
Just knowing how she could learn and being able to become what she thought was impossible to become, So I love giving the gift of learning. I love giving the gift of reading. My own son, so terribly frustrated with mathematics, low ACT score, very frustrated.
Yeah.
And a few weeks at Learning RX, and he made 100 in calculus in college. And I was like, yeah, that is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Great scores. He's a flight instructor now. And it's just mind-boggling to me that you can take this weakness and turn it into a strength. And it doesn't matter what caused it. I mean, in 2018, I was in the hospital for 8 months. I had a minor procedure done and went septic.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so the in and out, all the different surgeries, all the different procedures that I had to go through, and I had some memory loss for that. And I did brain training myself.
Yep.
And so to watch my own skills change was so super cool.
Yeah.
It was so neat to see that I could strengthen myself back up, and get my skills back to where they once were. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that it doesn't matter. It
Right.
doesn't matter. You can actually change that, just like you can physical
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
fitness for your body that you can. And I love the retention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love seeing parents that went through the program when they were kids and then they bring their kids back. Makes me feel a little old.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. That means you got the longevity.
That's
we were
right,
talking
that's
about.
right.
There's a good longevity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun to watch that.
Yeah.
So those are some of the fun stories, that
Yeah.
I see. But I really like it when kids go from giving up, or what I call mind shame.
Right,
They go
yep.
from their head being down and being discouraged to, I can do this. Or adults who've never been able to read. I had one young man who came in, and his only goal, he had never been able to read in his life, and his only goal, he had a 3-year-old, and he just wanted to read to his 3-year-old. That was his whole goal in life, to be able to do that. And so once he was able to graduate the program, he actually got a promotion because he was able to pass a test that he had never been able to pass because he couldn't
Wow.
read. And so
That's
it not only
awesome.
changed him to be able to read to his kid, but it changed his trajectory in life. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what
Yeah,
I
and then
love.
that pumps him up, to think, wow, I thought that wasn't even a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a reality, and think, well, what else can I do? All those stories are so inspiring and encouraging for the person who walked through it, and then for their entire community it is. So I know I would love to know, and probably our listeners as well, what would you say are some key principles or strategies, for lifelong learning?
I think one of the biggest things is, we do need to have, for our brain, we do need to have proper nutrition and hydration.
Yeah.
And those are really important. And of course, I cannot stress the importance of reading enough, to be that, embracing that and learning those things. But I think a lifelong learner is really someone who is challenged by new things. So I think one of the key things that everyone should do is try something new.
It's good.
Quit settling for whatever it is and try something new. I mean, I've heard, do crossword puzzles,
Yeah.
But if those things are easy for you, don't do that.
Right.
Try something that's challenging for you. Do a little Sudoku. I mean, try some dominoes. I mean, there's so many great games out there. I mean, I could give you a ton of games that are incredibly good for your brain, and just challenging yourself to do that. Learn a foreign language. I mean, do something that's outside your wheelhouse. And when you do that, that grows your brain so much, and it makes you a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
I mean, it does both. It embraces
Right.
both of those things, and gives you longevity, and gives
Yeah.
you cognitive flexibility, and gives you all of those other things that we want to see. I think one thing that I'm very, very challenged with is remembering that our brain is reliant on us resting properly. We're in a go generation. Everything technology on the go, always on the demand. And I think it's really important for us to remember the importance of rest. I mean, God himself rested, y'all. Let's realize that, you know, and we all need that. And it's so important for the brain. And the number one reason we see dementia and other things developing is because of the lack of rest for the brain. It's an
Right.
important phase
Well,
for the
it's
brain.
where healing comes. And my doctor told me you will not heal. It's not just recovery and you need rest in order to have strength or to be able to focus, but it's where you break down as you output all day, and then you rebuild and you heal. So even physical, so mental, emotional, physical, you need to sleep and stop and rest in order to build that back.
Yeah.
It's
And
good.
so few people realize that. They think that, we need to go all the time. And I think that's a big part of the learning process that people don't realize, that it's a big part of the learning process is actually rest.
Yeah.
Just rest. Time away.
Where do you think the hurdles come for most people when it comes to taking those steps of action? Like we hear those things. You need rest. You need. Same with therapy. Like where do you think the hurdles come for most people? Is it fear? Is it to take the step?
I think it's getting started. I think it's actually the getting started process. It's the I don't know how to start. If I had a checklist of how to start, this process, what do I need to do? I remember, right after I'd had back surgery, and that was the first thing is like, where do I start to get well? How do I, what's the first step in this process?
Yeah.
I mean, I had surgery. What's next,
Right.
And I think that is really the hardest thing for us, whether we've been through brain trauma or whether it's something we've had lifelong or it's something that's developing. I think it's the knowing where to start process. And again, I mean, this sounds shameless, but I think getting a cognitive assessment is a good place to start,
Yeah.
To talk about that. But if that's too big of a starting place for somebody, simply start drinking enough water every day. I mean, hydrate your brain.
Yeah.
Rest deliberately. I mean, put those things down that you need to do and do that. And I think, I'm a go person. So I think it's hard for me to rest, and I have to deliberately do it. So I have to leave my phone behind and go outside and walk away from it because it will call me all the time. It will. Somebody will be texting. There will be social media. And your brain can't rest if you have all of that. So I think being deliberate on how you go about those processes is really important.
I'm a goer as well. And I'm also a list maker, a to-do list person. I literally write, read, do a puzzle, go to bed. I write those things on my list because it's a priority, just like the tasks are. Do you have any other tips or tricks or things that we can all do at home to help, build our cognitive strength?
I think there's easy things that we can all do that we don't realize that we can do. Like, nutrition is a big factor. I think that 85% of Americans are magnesium deficient. I am on a passionate load of we need to be getting more magnesium into our diet because it's a key building point to our brain. So,
good.
in our body, in a lot of ways, it's an energy builder and it helps detox our brain. So I think that's a big factor. But probably maybe even bigger than that is just, I'm going to call it flossing, okay? So we know when we go to the dentist, they say floss your teeth. And there's a reason, because stuff gets caught in there that can't be gotten out any other way, right? Well, that's what happens in our brain too. We get caught into cycles of things and we don't get away from those cycles of things. And so I think flossing our brain is really, really important, and easy things to do that. I mean, there's easy processes to start that, but one that everybody who's a listener can do this is just name 5 colors. Name 5 names of boys. I mean, it's an easy activity, and it actually flosses your memory. And that's just a crazy, super easy thing. And you're like, really? That's what it does? Those are super easy things. One of my favorite games is categories because it flosses the brain. 5-second rule, it flosses the brain. Those are things that help you just have that. Make a family game night. Play with your friends. Go out and interact with other couples, or, do those types of things that are social, because socialization is so good for the brain. So again, all of those are just flossing. That's just, making your brain to be active in a different environment. Try something new that's different than you, that you've never done. One of my goals this year, we always set new resolutions. My resolution was that I was going to try different types of eating, like different types of food groups, different restaurants, different things I've never tried before, and I'm really shy about that kind of stuff. So that has been my challenge to myself, was to try something that's out of the box for me. And that's been fun. It's been fun to see a lot of ways of perspective and, looking at things differently, and challenging myself and making myself get out, even when I'm fatigued.
Yeah, that's great.
I know both of us, we connected that we're both authors. We've both written quite a few books, and you have 15 of them that you've written, of all kinds of different books that you have written. And we both write because we want to be able to get resources into people's hands, because we understand the value of reading. Speak to that a little bit, just on how important the reading is for brain training. I know as we've talked some, just in it's shifted and that people are looking at devices and they don't have hard books in their hands. Like, why is reading so important?
Reading is important on a lot of levels, but the fancy word is called schema.
Okay.
So it's our filing cabinet of our brain, and the filing cabinet of our brain only grows or connects the more connections that it has. So the first time you hear the word elephant, in your first exposure to the word elephant, your brain only fires a little little piece. And then the next time you have an exposure to that, so the more exposures you have. And what reading does is it exposes you constantly and consistently to sets of words and vocabulary and learning and growing in that range. So you actually learn new material and new information. I've been infinitely challenged in the last little bit because one of the students that I'm training right now personally is in the spelling bee. And my word, there's some words I have never, ever heard or seen in my life. And I'll give him the word and he'll say, definition, please. And I'm like, ooh, no, I got to look that one up.
Right.
You know, it's the whole thing of like, that has been so eye-opening to me is just to go through the script spelling bee list and look and like, oh my word, how many words I do not know.
Yeah.
And I read every day. So I think that builds your schema of your brain, your filing cabinet of your brain to be able to be exposed to those things. And why the hard book over the tablet or everything like that is the revisiting. We have a tendency to revisit when we have a hard copy. We tend not to revisit when it's digital. And blue lights and a whole lot of other issues to go with the brain, you know, that's really important for us to be able to see it reflect on the paper rather than just on a tablet.
Okay.
And AI world, they can change it on a tablet.
Yeah.
Things can be changed so quickly where it's not, you know, when we look at it and when it's written in a book, whether it's accurate information or it's not accurate information, it's there where you can actually revisit and you can research it and you can learn more about that textual. So I think, again, that goes back to that whole process of that learning and building the longevity of experience where you can interact with it. You can interact with the text. One of my favorite quotes, and I'll probably get in trouble here for not even remembering the author who said it, but it was the interaction of text. When you interact with text, you actually bring dead to life. And that's the craziest because you're actually looking at something that may have been written hundreds of years ago or even thousands of years ago. And when you interact with that, you bring it back to life in a new experience. And all three of us could read the same paragraph, the same experience, and to go away with a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Sure is. So can you tell us some exciting things that are taking place at Learning RX, you know, that some of our listeners can benefit from?
Oh, we have so many things that are going on. But one of the really fun things, since we're on the reading subject, we're launching on April the 12th. We're actually having a book signing with all of our authors. You know, we have so many authors in our area. It's incredible, right? We have some really, really like over 24 authors that I know of, but there's probably more than that. But we're having a book signing, and then we're launching our Chill and Read. And Chill and Read is a little fun competition for all ages, and a lot of the local businesses participate in it. So it's reading bingo. Basically, you read, and you have 5 activities to do. And when you finish those 5 activities, you can claim a prize.
That's so neat.
And you can do reading bingo in all different directions, you know.
Yep.
And you can black out the whole sheet and get another prize. And we have an adult reading sheet. We have a teen reading sheet. We have a young child reading sheet. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how old you are. So that's a fun thing.
You're making
like,
learning
that
fun.
Was like, that's learning fun. And
that's cool.
Look, I remember when I was a youngin', I actually got to read for pizza at Pizza Hut. Do y'all remember that? Like you get a personal pan pizza, or y'all may be too young for that.
If you read enough books.
Like, you read enough books, you got a personal pan pizza. You know, it's like, that was so cool. So we have that too. You can get a Johnny's Pizza. Anyways, yes, it's kind of the fun things of interacting and being able to get rewarded for doing something that's fun anyways, and encouraging the journey So that's kind of one of the fun things that we have that's coming up that we enjoy doing. And we always have brain training going on. So that's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I love it. That's some exciting stuff, and for all ages, not just for kids, but the fact you guys are making that impact across the board. And so we appreciate you sharing that. What we like to do right now is we're in transition into what we call our rapid fire questions.
All right.
So these are going to be 30 to 40 seconds
Okay.
of your responses. So Cristi, why don't you kick us off with our first question?
Sure. What do you love about this current season of life that you're in?
I love adapting right now. This is my flexibility life. My mother has brain cancer right now, so I'm learning a lot about brain cancer and how that transitions. So I'm learning a lot about, that role of life of being a caregiver. And then my children are in a different walk of life now, married, moving on to their career. So I'm kind of the sandwich generation, but I like exploring what the possibilities of the future are going to be. So that's kind of where I'm at, as I'm exploring a lot of different possibilities, and I see infinite possibilities in front of me, and I like it.
That's awesome.
I like that there's a lot of fun adventures ahead in the learning process.
That's
So
good.
yeah,
That's great.
I think that's fun.
So what piece of advice, thinking about your journey, has someone given to you that about learning or brain training in your world, piece of advice that someone has given to you that you'd like to pass on to our audience?
I think the best piece of advice I've ever been given is don't sweat the small stuff. I think if more of us could not sweat the small stuff, and the way I piece it for my students, and whether they're adults or children, is the situation you're in right now going to matter 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now, 5 days from now, 5 months from now? If you can measure that, then you can get outside of yourself. You can get outside of the spiral that you can get in, and that is so cool. It's so powerful to be able to do that. And so somebody did that for me many, many years ago, and I think that's probably been the best thing that ever was given to me.
That's so good. Thanks for sharing that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So who would you say invested in you the most over the years?
Definitely my parents. My parents, of course, my dad's a pastor. My mom is my best friend. I really enjoy their experience and how they have fed into people. And I've watched, that has been really intriguing to me to see how much but they definitely have always been there for me. I never had a doubt that they would be there for me. So I probably would say, yeah, my parents be the best.
Yeah. So we know that how we're raised impacts a lot of what we do as we continue in life, and I'm sure that's had a huge impact on even your journey of writing. So you've got several books. It's 15 books that we talked about earlier in the podcast that you've written. So tell us a little bit about your books and maybe how they could either be beneficial to our audience, or just give us a highlight of kind of the books you have so that our audience is aware of the resources that you have out there.
So right now I'm writing in kind of 3 to 4 different genres.
Okay.
I have one genre that is just kind of a life experience, because I've had so many life experiences from, cancers and surgeries and child loss and my brother being murdered and so many. So I've written a series about how to deal with those different things. And wading through those in short snippets. They're really, really pretty and really easy to take in. I think those are fun if you're going through, certain experiences, to do that. I've written a lot about brain training because it's my passion, right? And so I have one that's called The Collective, which is a collection of articles I've written over the years, put together. And then I have other little small books, that are about brain training, depending on what part of life you're in, whether you're my freaking amazing brain because you're a teenager, or whether you're wanting the brain house because you're an older, or neurodiversity. Neurodiverse is a book I wrote about that. So I think that genre is fun because you're learning about the brain, and you're learning about how the brain continues to learn. And is it dementia, or is it just old age? What are those different things that are happening? So that's fun. Probably the one I write every single day started as a gift for me was I write a devotional every single morning based on the scripture, and that has turned into a series called Reflections of God Moments. And the fourth book in that series just came out. They're done in 8-week devotionals, and it's really pretty. They have really pretty scripture pictures, and it's just a lot of fun to examine how those scriptures are relevant to us in our everyday walk. And so I write every day on Facebook. I have, my Books by Donesa page, and I write a devotional every morning for that. And then they're compiled into the books so that you can have them for longevity. So they cover a lot of different scriptures, and I think that's fun.
Yeah.
That's a lot of good interaction.
That's good.
There.
Where could, so you have a Facebook page that
Sure.
does that with, but where's a good place for people to find those resources at?
Oh, the easiest is probably Amazon, because my name is so unusual.
Yeah.
You can type in my name and all my books pop up.
And we'll put it on the screen so that you can pop that up. So
Yeah, my name is pretty unusual, so you
Yeah.
can pretty much Google my name. And my dad is Dawn, my mom is Teresa, so they put it together, and that's what Donesa came from. So
love it.
yeah, there
Gotcha.
you go. So
And it helps you out.
yeah, it's a pretty unusual. Yeah, it works.
good.
I can get away with it that way.
Excellent. We definitely want to check those out. So last question.
Love it.
What is next for Donesa?
I don't know. I think that's part of the fun. I think that's part of the adventure, is not knowing what's next for me. Obviously, it's a life-changing journey, because you don't know. It could be a car accident, which I say that with tongue in cheek, because I did have one that was just recent in November, was unexpected, the unexpected thing. So it could be something super easy, and it could be something, but what I embrace is that I don't know, and it's okay for I don't know. If I could leave anything and say, I have learned something through this whole journey that my mom told me, and I really think it's one of the most incredible things to ever hear, that peace is not the absence of conflict or the absence of situation, but it's confidence when you're in the midst of those storms, when you're in the midst of that transition, when you're in the midst of that. And I think that for me is the place that's next. It's just peace. I just want to exist in peace. I know everybody goes, well, you just want world peace, the beauty queen. But the reality is that's what we all desire. Yeah. And I think that is the next thing for me. And it's the thing I have today, and it's the thing I have tomorrow, and it's the consistent thing. And I think that's the blessing that we have, is that we can embrace that. We don't have to know what's next. We just have to go forward and enjoy the process.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Yeah, love it. Great final words to end on there. We appreciate you taking the time today to walk through your journey, sharing some of your resources, but also just sharing some insight for our audience out there, who I think could be really benefited by leveraging you guys' services that you offer and helping in that brain training. I know myself, I can always use those extra skills to sharpen the brain. So appreciate your time today for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And a special thank you to our sponsors today, B-Lane Printed Apparel and Learning RX.
Yeah, and Donesa, we want to just say thank you for sticking around here in a few moments for our Patreon members to be able to have a little behind-the-scenes snapshot of just some discussion, some fun interaction. I know we've enjoyed our time together. You've enjoyed the time with her, so you're going to want to get on our Patreon, be part of our Patreon Inner Circle. You can do that at patreon.com/The Uncommon Success Podcast, and for as little as $7 a month, you can get those little bonus footage clips as we have those little 10 to 15 minute discussions just for members. Also, we release each month who our guests are going to be each week, and we'll be releasing that this week for the month of March, so you can find out who is going to be our guest on our Patreon.
Yes, and be sure to follow us on all of our platforms, Apple and Spotify and YouTube. You can also join us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and review. And please leave us comments. We like good stuff, bad stuff, what you're thinking, what inspired you, all of it. We want to hear it.
Yeah, and feel free to leave any comments about Cristi
Good
this
stuff.
week.
That's where the good stuff comes in. Just
bad.
the good stuff.
Brinley will be back hopefully in a few weeks. We may have lost Brinley. We don't really know. But Cristi, thank you
Hope
for
not.
helping me out today.
Hey,
and joining
I know I
co-hosting.
can't. I don't measure up to Brinley, but I hope it wasn't.
You did a
it was
great job. And Donesa,
good.
great job. Thank you for
Yes.
joining us as well. And to our audience, join us next week as we explore the topic of becoming a better communicator.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, have a great week, and we'll see you. Thank you for joining us on the Uncommon Success Podcast, where your commitment to growth fuels our passion to create more content. Special thanks to our executive producer, Jess Camp, and our technical director, Stephen Posey. We're excited about our episode next week and hope you would tune in to join us as we work together to continue our journey towards success. See you next time. Have a great week.